Some women scream when they find out. Some women break plates, break down, break vows of their own just to feel something back. 𝗵𝐸𝐿 set a table. She'd pressed the linen tablecloth twice. Once wasn't enough to get the fold lines out, and she stood back from it in the low gold light of 6 p.m., studying it the way you'd study a painting you weren't sure you liked yet. 3 plates. 3 glasses. The good ones, the wedding china they only used at Christmas. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't look at it right away. She finished lighting the second candle first. Come home. I made your favorite. That was the text. 6 words. She'd written and deleted it 4 times before sending it, which is its own kind of confession, that even in the moment she'd waited a year for, some small part of her still wanted to get the wording right for him. You need to understand who 𝗵 was before that night, or none of this will make sense. She was the kind of woman people described as so calm, which is usually a nice way of saying we have no idea what's actually going on in there. She'd grown up watching her mother cry in parking lots after her father left, and she made a private vow at 11 years old that she would never let anyone see her fall apart like that. Not because she was strong. Because she was terrified of being that visible in her pain. So when she found the first text message 11 months earlier, a name saved as 𝗵, client, in her husband Colin's phone, a message that read last night was the best thing that's happened to me in years, she didn't confront him. She closed the phone. She made dinner. She said nothing. And I know how that sounds, the narrator's voice might say here, quietly, almost embarrassed for her. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't she just leave right then? Because leaving isn't a single door. It's 100 small ones, and 𝗵 had learned a long time ago that you don't slam the first door you find. You count them all first. 𝗂𝐚𝐬𝐿 was not a cruel man. That's the uncomfortable truth at the center of this story. He never hit her, never screamed, never did anything a courtroom would call abuse. He was just absent, in the particular way certain men are absent while still sitting at the dinner table every night. He'd stopped asking about her day around year 6. He'd started calling his marriage comfortable to his friends, which he thought was a compliment. 𝗵 Anand, 34, was his colleague, sharp, funny, recently out of a relationship that had left her feeling disposable. Colin had told her, more than once, that his marriage was basically over, that 𝗵 was checked out, that he was just waiting for the right time. People believe what they need to believe, the narrator notes, and 𝗵 needed to believe she wasn't the villain in someone else's story. Most of us do. That evening, Colin walked through the door at 6:40, keys jangling, already smiling at the smell of rosemary chicken. Babe, this looks, he stopped in the doorway. 3 plates. His stomach did something complicated. He looked at the third setting the way you look at a word you can't quite read. 𝗵, why is there? The doorbell rang. Here's the thing about silence, the narrator says, and there's a weight to it now, a slight unsteadiness, like even telling this part is hard. It can be a weapon. It can also just be someone who's run out of things to perform. 𝗵 didn't answer him. She walked to the door. 𝗵 stood on the porch in her work blazer, phone in hand, looking like she'd been summoned by a text she didn't fully understand either, because she had been. 𝗵 had sent her one too, an hour earlier, using Colin's backup email she'd known the password to for months. Colin wants us all to talk tonight. Please come. 𝗵's face, when she saw 𝗵's face, calm, unreadable, holding the door open, that's the moment even the narrator has to pause. I don't think I can tell you what that felt like for her. Some silences you just have to sit in. Dinner started, unbelievably, as dinner. Colin talked too fast, filling air, the way people do when the silence terrifies them more than any accusation would. 𝗵 barely touched her food. 𝗵 ate slowly, deliberately, the way someone eats when they've decided nothing is going to rush them tonight. It was Colin who finally broke. 𝗵, please. Just say something. She set down her fork. I know about 𝗵, she said. Not loud. Not shaking. I've known for 11 months. The room went somewhere quiet you couldn't hear on a microphone. Priya's hand found the edge of the table. 11, Colin started, and stopped, doing math with his face. I'm not here to yell at either of you, Maren said. I got tired of waiting to feel ready to yell. So I stopped waiting. And this is where most stories like this one go one direction, the narrator admits, almost like she's arguing with the audience now. Plates thrown. Voices raised. The wronged wife finally gets her moment. But Maren had already had her moment. She'd just had it alone, for almost a year, where nobody was watching. She reached under her chair and placed a folder on the table. Colin opened it with hands that had gone unsteady. Inside, a signed lease on a 2-bedroom apartment 8 minutes from their daughter's school. A job offer letter, senior analyst, a title he didn't know she'd been qualified for, because he'd never asked what she did all day at her old job beyond something with spreadsheets. A custody agreement, drafted by a lawyer, already reviewed, already fair, already done. And divorce papers, signed on her side, waiting on the line for his. I'm not here for revenge, Maren said, and her voice caught, just slightly, just once, the only crack in the whole evening. I'm here because I didn't want you finding out I left. I wanted you to see me leave. Priya was crying quietly by now, not for herself, exactly, for the version of this story she thought she'd been standing in, which had just turned out to be someone else's ending entirely. Colin didn't say anything for a long time. What was there to say? You cannot argue with a woman who's already built the exit before you noticed the door was open. Here's what got me, doing this story, the narrator says, and there's something almost tired in it, something honest. We love to imagine revenge as a scene. A slap. A speech. A mic drop. But real justice, the kind that actually holds up over years, it doesn't look like a scene at all. It looks like a lease signed quietly on a Tuesday. It looks like a woman learning a new job in her 30s because she refused to stay small. It looks like custody papers drafted before anyone even raised their voice. Maren didn't win that night because she humiliated anyone. She won a year earlier, in 100 unremarkable moments nobody was filming. She stood, folded her napkin, and looked at both of them, not with hatred, the narrator insists, genuinely, not with hatred, with something closer to relief. The chicken's good, she said. You should both eat something before you go. Then she picked up her coat, and walked out of her own dining room, into a life she'd already finished building. The best revenge was never the dinner. It was everything she did before anyone knew she was hungry for something else.